Craig Crosscut Station makes it possible for you to get miter saw quality cuts with your circular saw. Like all Craig guided cutting products, it allows you to make cuts confidently that are straight, accurate, and reliable. For the best accuracy, it's important to get your Crosscut Station assembled and set up correctly. It's easy to do and it's covered in the manual, but we'll walk you through it here. The Craig Crosscut Station works with almost any circular saw and will even help you make sure that your saw is all ready to go. Before you jump into building, take a look at what comes in the box. You'll find the cutting base, the blade guard actuator, the SureCut backer board, the angle indicators with material supports, an adjustable fence, 2 guide rails, hold down clamps, assembly hardware, and of course an owner's manual. And all you need for assembly is a Phillips screwdriver. Start by making sure the base is oriented correctly with the safety markings right side up for you to see. Then you can attach the angle indicators with support wings. They pop right into position and self-align, then get attached with 2 screws apiece. Next comes the blade guard actuator and the SureCut backboard. Make sure that the holes are facing outward. You'll use those later to install the saw guide rails. They both slide into place and get attached with a couple of longer screws. Now it's time to add the saw guide rails. So you'll need the circular saw you intend to use. The saw can be corded or cordless and have the blade on the left or the right. Make sure that the saw is unplugged or has the battery removed before you do any setup. There are 2 guide rails, a fixed one and an adjustable one. The fixed one goes on the side opposite the blade. So for this right blade saw, it will go on the left. The adjustable guide rail goes on the right. Set the saw on the rails and then check to see the position of the blade. You want it roughly centered on the width of the cutting base. Move the saw and the rails until the blade's roughly centered. Then on the fixed rail, check to see if there are mounting holes aligned. Line it up and attach the fixed rail with a couple of screws in each end. Now set the saw in place and roughly position the adjustable rail again. Then you can attach the brackets that hold it in place. Use holes that leave some adjustment room and attach the brackets with 2 screws in each. To finalize rail installation, you'll need to tighten the adjustable rail. So, set your saw in place and slide it back toward the starting position. Make sure it's tight against the fixed rail and then push the adjustable rail against the saw base and tighten the set screw at that end. Now move the saw to the other end, press the adjustable rail into place and tighten this screw as well. You want the saw base to fit tightly, but still move easily without wobbling. Once the rails are mounted, the next step in the manual is to cut the saw kerf. But before you do that, it's a good idea to make sure your saw is set up correctly. First, if the blade is old or dull, swap it out for a fresh one. Then, make sure the blade is set at 90 degrees to the base. To do that, set the saw to full cutting depth. Pull the blade guard back, and then use a good square to check. If you see any gap, loosen the saw's bevel lock and then adjust it. Now you can set the cutting depth of your saw. Every time you use the Crosscut Station, you'll set it for a 2-inch deep cut. You can use the scale on the saw, and if you want to, use the square again to double check the cutting depth. With assembly and saw setup complete, you can take the last important step in getting your Crosscut Station ready, cutting the kerf in the saw base. So now you can plug in your saw or reinstall the battery. Now, place the saw base on the rails and slide it as far forward as you can without the blade touching the blade guard actuator. Pull the trigger Let the blade get up to speed, and then cut through the actuator. Continue forward, which will cut a kerf in the MDF base, stopping the saw when the center of the blade reaches the backboard. With that, you can slide in the adjustable fence, add the hold-down clamps, and your crosscut station is all ready to use. As you use the crosscut station, you're bound to discover some tips and great tricks for getting good results. We hope you'll share them with us and with the Craig communities on social media. And of course, don't forget that the Crosscut Station is just one part of Craig's growing lineup of guided cutting tools that are designed to make sure that you can make